For 5 years she was a ghost. No fingerprints, no digital footprint, no past. She thought the icy isolation of Montana had buried her secrets forever. But you can't hide from a Navy SEAL, K9, trained to scent fear gunpowder and the blood of a classified war. The snow in Whitefish, Montana had a way of burying things. It buried the roads, the sounds of the city, and if you were careful enough, your past. For Chloe Evans, the blistering cold was a blanket of security. She had spent the last 5 years living a life of meticulously crafted mediocrity. She drove a rusted 2011 Subaru, rented a small cabin off a secluded dirt road, and worked as a veterinary technician at Dr. Benjamin Foster's clinic. Chloe was quiet, fiercely private, and entirely unremarkable. At least that was the illusion. In reality, Chloe Evans didn't exist. Before the snow, before the fake ID forged in a basement in Munich, she was Captain Evelyn Cross, a Tier 1 intelligence operative attached to the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. But Evelyn Cross had died in a fiery car crash outside Berlin 5 years ago. The military had held a closed-casket funeral. A folded flag was handed to a distant aunt. Chloe had done the impossible. She had vanished from the most sophisticated surveillance grid on the planet, and she would have stayed vanished if the bell above the clinic door hadn't chimed at 4:15 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday. Dr. Foster was in the back, checking on a sedated golden retriever. Chloe was up front, organizing patient files when the draft of freezing air hit her. She looked up and felt the blood drain entirely from her face. Standing in the doorway was a man who screamed military. He didn't wear a uniform, just a heavy Carhartt jacket, faded jeans and scuffed boots. But his posture, the way his eyes instantly scanned the exits, and the rigid coiled tension in his shoulders gave him away immediately. But it wasn't the man that made Chloe's heart slam against her ribs. It was the dog standing flawlessly at his left heel. It was a Belgian Malinois, massive, lean, and heavily scarred. The dog was missing a piece of its left ear, and a jagged line of discolored fur ran down its right shoulder, the unmistakable signature of shrapnel. It wore a heavy-duty tactical harness, stripped of any government patches, but the dark olive-drab webbing was JSOC issue. "Can I help you?" Chloe asked, forcing her voice to sound light, customer service, friendly, though her muscles were screaming at her to run for the back door. "Yeah, sorry to walk in so late," the man said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone. "Just moved to town. My boy here is due for his joint supplements, and I wanted to get him registered locally." "Of course," Chloe said, pulling a blank intake form across the counter. "What's his name?" "Titan," the man said. Chloe's pen froze for a fraction of a second. "Titan." The name echoed in her mind like a gunshot. Syria. 2019. A blacked-out MH-60 Little Bird helicopter tearing through the night sky. The smell of aviation fuel sweat and dry desert dust. A SEAL assault team sitting in the dark, and at their feet, a Malinois with a titanium-capped canine tooth panting softly over the roar of the rotors. It couldn't be. The military had hundreds of working dogs. But as Chloe stepped around the counter to hand the man a clipboard, Titan's head snapped up. The Malinois didn't sniff her politely, like a normal dog. His dark, intelligent eyes locked onto Chloe's face. He stepped forward, bypassing the man's leg, and pressed his nose firmly against Chloe's knee. He took one long, deep breath. Then the dog did something that made the air in the room turn to ice. Titan took a step back, dropped into a rigid, perfect sit, and raised his right paw, resting it deliberately on the toe of Chloe's boot. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He just stared up at her, waiting. The man holding the leash froze. The casual demeanor vanished from his face, replaced by a razor-sharp intensity. He stared at his dog, then slowly raised his eyes to Chloe. "That's strange," the man said softly, his hand subtly shifting closer to his hip. "He doesn't do that. Ever." "Do what?" Chloe asked, forcing a nervous chuckle. "Shake hands. That's not a handshake," the man replied, his eyes burning holes through her disguise. "That's a classified target recognition alert. He only does that for friendly operatives he's embedded with. He's identifying you." Chloe's mind raced. The protocol was known as a green light sit. It was used during night exfiltrations to prevent friendly fire. The dog would silently identify deep cover operatives to the extraction team. Titan remembered her scent. 5 years, 3 continents and gallons of cheap perfume. Later, the dog remembered the scent of Captain Evelyn Cross. "I think your dog is confused," Chloe said, backing away slowly, her right hand slipping into the pocket of her scrubs, where she always kept a ceramic folding knife. "I've never been anywhere near the military. I grew up in Portland." The man looked at the intake form she had just handed him. He hadn't written his name yet, but he didn't need to. "I'm Chief Petty Officer David Lawson," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "And Titan here. He was deployed with DevGru. He doesn't get confused, Miss Evans. He remembers you." "I need to check on the doctor," Chloe blurted out, spinning on her heel and speed-walking into the back room. She didn't stop in the treatment area. She bypassed Dr. Foster, entirely went straight out the back door, into the freezing alley, and broke into a dead sprint. The ghost life was over. The clock was ticking, and she had less than an hour before the hounds of her past were released. By the time Chloe's rusted Subaru fishtailed up the icy driveway of her secluded cabin, the sun had fully set, plunging the Montana woods into a suffocating darkness. She killed the headlights a quarter-mile out, navigating the treacherous path by memory. She burst through the front door, immediately bypassing the light switches. Moving in the dark, she pulled the rug back in the living room, pried up the loose floorboard, and hauled out a heavy waterproof Pelican case. She popped the latches. Inside lay the tools of a dead woman, 3 different passport stacks of euros and US dollars, a matte black Glock 19 with 3 loaded magazines, a satellite phone, and a secure hard drive. The hard drive. Chloe stared at it, her chest heaving as she shoved magazines into her tactical belt. That little piece of metal was the reason Evelyn Cross had to die. 5 years ago, during Operation Sand Viper, in the Araka province, her intelligence unit had been tasked with raiding an insurgent compound. But when they breached the servers, Chloe didn't find terrorist communications. She found financial ledgers, off-the-books transactions linking a highly decorated American General Adrian Bradley to the sale of weaponized drone software to foreign paramilitaries. Bradley wasn't just a commander. He was a kingmaker in the Pentagon. When Chloe realized her own commanding officers were part of the smuggling ring, it was already too late. Her convoy was ambushed 3 days later. They called it an enemy IED, but Chloe saw the laser targeting beam. It was a localized drone strike, an American drone strike. She barely survived escaping into the desert with the encrypted drive. She knew if she went to the authorities, she'd be killed in holding. So she became a ghost, until today, until David Lawson and Titan walked into her clinic. Chloe grabbed her heavy winter coat, slung a duffel bag over her shoulder, and racked the slide of the Glock. She was reaching for the doorknob when a sharp electronic chirp echoed from her kitchen counter. It was her perimeter alarm. Someone had just tripped the infrared sensor at the base of her driveway. Chloe dropped her duffel, raising her weapon, and pressing her back against the wall beside the heavy oak door. The snow outside muffled the footsteps, but she heard the faint, distinct crunch of ice under heavy boots. Then a low, structural whine as weight was pressed against the wooden porch. "Chloe," a voice called out through the heavy timber of the door. It was Lawson. "Or whatever your real name is. I'm alone. Titan is in the truck. Don't shoot through the door." Chloe tightened her grip on the pistol, her breathing shallow and silent. "If you take one more step, Chief, I will put a hollow point through your chest," she yelled back, projecting her voice to sound like it was coming from the center of the room. "You're fast," Lawson said, his voice calm, betraying no fear. But you left a hell of a footprint leaving the clinic. I ran your plates. Chloe Evans. Social Security number issued 5 years ago. No tax history before that. No hospital records. You don't exist. Go away, Lawson. I can't do that, he replied. Titan deployed on 72 direct action raids. He saved my life more times than I can count. When he gave you that signal today, it freaked me out. So I made a call. Chloe's blood ran cold. He made a call. Who did you call? She demanded, stepping away from the wall, her finger resting dangerously close to the trigger. A buddy at Naval Intelligence, Lawson said. I gave him your description. I told him about the dog's reaction. I asked if there were any female intel operatives who went MIA in the Syrian theater around 2019. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut. Idiot. You naive, loyal idiot. Lawson listened to me very carefully, Chloe said, her voice dropping the frantic civilian act, replacing it with the cold, authoritative tone of a military officer. Who exactly did your buddy report to? He didn't say. He just told me to stay put, and that a specialized debrief team from JSOC was in the area. They're coming to talk to you. They aren't coming to talk, David, Chloe shouted, ripping the door open. Lawson stood on the porch, his hands raised, instinctively startled by the sudden movement, and the barrel of the Glock aimed perfectly at the bridge of his nose. Get inside, now, she commanded. Lawson stepped in, his eyes darting to her weapon, her tactical belt, and the open Pelican case on the floor. You're an operative, he breathed, realization finally washing over his hardened features. My God. You're Evelyn Cross. They said you burned in a vehicle fire in Berlin. I did, Chloe said, slamming the door and locking the deadbolt. And General Adrian Bradley lit the match. Lawson's face hardened. General Bradley. He's the head of Joint Special Operations Command now. He's a 4-star. He's a traitor, Chloe snapped, rushing to the window and peering through the edge of the curtains. I have proof on a drive that he sold targeting algorithms to the highest bidder. When they realized I had the data, they wiped my team out to silence me. If you called Naval Intel, you just lit a beacon right over my head. Before Lawson could process the sheer magnitude of what she was saying, a sound pierced the quiet night. From down the dirt road where Lawson had parked his truck, a dog began to bark. But it wasn't a normal bark. It was a vicious, echoing roar, the sound of a Malinois engaging a target. Titan was going ballistic. Titan's in the truck, Lawson said, panic finally bleeding into his voice as he reached for his own concealed weapon, pulling a Sig Sauer P320 from his waistband. He only barks like that for an armed threat. Chloe stared out the window into the dense, snowy tree line. At first there was nothing, just the white powder falling in the moonlight. Then she saw them. 4 faint red laser dots swept across the snow, cutting through the falling flakes. They were moving in perfect tactical synchronization, fanning out to surround the cabin. Suppressed weapons. Night vision goggles. General Bradley hadn't sent a debrief team. He had sent a hit squad. They tracked your phone, Chloe said, her voice eerily calm, as the training from her past fully overrode her panic. She looked at Lawson, the man who had accidentally signed both their death warrants. How much ammo do you have? 2 mags, Lawson said, chambering around. It's not enough, Chloe said, grabbing her duffel bag. We have 30 seconds before they breach the windows. We need to get to your truck, get Titan, and get off this mountain. A heavy thud echoed from the roof. One of the operators had already scaled the back porch. Too late, Lawson whispered. Suddenly, the glass of the front window shattered inward in a shower of deadly shards as a flashbang grenade was tossed into the living room. Chloe didn't hesitate. Down, she screamed, diving behind the heavy oak kitchen island just as the grenade detonated, filling the cabin with a blinding, deafening roar of white light and thunder. The ghost of Whitefish was dead. Captain Evelyn Cross was back at war. The flashbang grenade detonated with a blinding, concussive force that sucked the oxygen straight out of the room. A high-pitched ringing pierced Chloe's ears, and for 2 agonizing seconds, the world was nothing but white light and the taste of sulfur. But Evelyn Cross had been forged in the chaos of war. Before her vision even cleared, muscle memory took over. She rolled hard to her left, bringing the Glock up just as the heavy oak front door was kicked off its hinges. 2 operators swarmed into the cabin, their suppressed carbines spitting a barrage of hollow-point rounds that shredded the kitchen island where she and Lawson had just been standing. Chloe fired twice. Crack, crack. The lead operator collapsed, clutching his Kevlar-plated chest, the breath knocked out of him. It wasn't a kill shot, but it bought them exactly 3 seconds. The floorboard. Chloe screamed over the deafening gunfire, grabbing Lawson by the collar of his Carhartt jacket and dragging him toward the pantry. Lawson didn't hesitate. He laid down a wall of covering fire with his Sig Sauer, the loud, unsuppressed booms echoing like thunder inside the tiny cabin. Chloe kicked away a rug in the pantry, revealing a hidden trapdoor. She had spent her first 3 months in Whitefish, digging this tunnel by hand, freezing her fingers to the bone just for a moment, exactly like this. She shoved Lawson down the dark chute and dove in right behind him, pulling the heavy reinforced hatch shut, just as the wall above her disintegrated from a hail of bullets. They slid down the icy dirt embankment, landing in a cramped crawl space beneath the cabin's foundation. The air was freezing, biting at their lungs. Above them, heavy combat boots pounded against the floorboards. "They're going to find the hatch," Lawson whispered, his breathing heavy, his eyes adjusting to the pitch black. "I know," Chloe said, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small remote detonator. "That's why I left them a parting gift." She pressed the button. A localized thermite charge planted strategically inside the cabin's wood stove ignited. It wasn't an explosive. It was a devastating chemical fire that burned at over 4,000 degrees. Above them, the operators began screaming as the cabin's interior instantly transformed into a blinding white-hot furnace. "Go out the grate," Chloe commanded, shoving Lawson forward. They scrambled through the dirt, kicking open the iron ventilation grate and spilling out into the thigh-deep snow behind the cabin. The night air was chaotic. The cabin was fully engulfed in blinding flames, casting long, nightmarish shadows across the tree line. "The truck is 50 yards east," Lawson grunted, keeping low as they waded through the heavy powder. "But we have a problem." Chloe followed his gaze. Standing between them and Lawson's heavy-duty Ford Raptor was a third operator dressed in white winter camouflage. The man was slowly advancing toward the truck, his rifle raised. Inside the cab, Titan was going absolutely berserk, throwing his massive 70-pound body against the reinforced glass, his jaws snapping viciously. "He's going to shoot the dog," Lawson said, panic rising in his chest. He raised his pistol, but the distance was too great for a guaranteed shot in the dark, and his hands were shaking from the freezing cold. "Wait," Chloe whispered, her eyes locked on the truck. She recognized the structural integrity of that specific vehicle model. "The glass is freezing. The internal heater is off." The operator raised his suppressed rifle, aiming squarely at the driver's side window, where Titan was furiously lunging. But Titan didn't just lunge. The Malinois was a DevGru veteran trained to breach. Recognizing the weapon, Titan backed up to the center console, coiled his muscular hind legs, and launched himself with terrifying velocity directly at the center of the frosted, weakened window. The glass shattered outward in a spectacular explosion of ice and shards. Before the operator could even pull the trigger, 70 pounds of pure airborne muscle hit him squarely in the chest. Titan's jaws clamped shut over the man's tactical vest, dragging him backward into the snow. The operator screamed, dropping his rifle, as he desperately tried to fight off the furious K9. "Move!" Chloe yelled. They sprinted across the clearing. Lawson tackled the operator off his dog, driving the butt of his pistol into the man's helmet, knocking him out cold. "Titan heel," Lawson barked. The dog instantly released the man, spinning around, and standing rigidly by Lawson's side, his snout covered in frost and a thin line of blood. Good boy, Chloe breathed, pulling open the passenger door. Get in now. Lawson threw the Raptor into gear, the massive tires spinning desperately on the ice before finally catching traction. They tore down the mountain road, leaving the blazing cabin and the groaning operator behind. Where are we going? Lawson yelled, gripping the steering wheel as the truck fishtailed around a treacherous icy bend. They're going to have drones in the air in 5 minutes. We can't outrun a JSOC thermal satellite. We aren't running, Chloe said, unzipping her duffel bag and pulling out the encrypted hard drive. In the faint green glow of the dashboard, her face looked entirely different. The quiet, terrified vet tech was gone. Captain Evelyn Cross was at the wheel now. General Bradley wants to erase my past, she said, her voice dripping with cold determination. Fine, but I'm going to make sure the whole world sees his. There's a decommissioned Cold War-era radar station 20 miles north near the Canadian border. Chloe instructed her fingers flying across a ruggedized military laptop she had pulled from her bag. It's abandoned, but the high-gain microwave antenna still functions. I tapped into it 3 years ago, just in case. Lawson pushed the accelerator to the floor. You're going to upload the drive. I'm going to broadcast it, Chloe corrected. To the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Department of Defense Inspector General, and the investigative desks of 5 major news networks simultaneously. Once the data hits the civilian servers, Bradley can't put the genie back in the bottle. Titan whined softly from the back seat, pushing his heavy head between the 2 front seats. He nudged Chloe's shoulder. She paused her typing, reaching up to scratch him behind his scarred ear. I owe you my life, buddy, she whispered. 20 agonizing minutes later, the truck smashed through the rusted chain-link gates of the abandoned Blackwood Peak station. The towering rusted satellite dish loomed ominously against the snowy night sky. They bailed out of the truck, the freezing wind howling fiercely at this altitude. Chloe sprinted toward the concrete control bunker at the base of the tower, Lawson and Titan covering her flanks. Inside the bunker it was freezing and smelled of decaying concrete. Chloe slammed her laptop onto a rusted steel desk and jammed a thick, heavy-duty Ethernet cable from the wall's ancient terminal directly into her machine. She plugged the encrypted drive into the USB port. Bypassing the firewall, establishing uplink. She muttered, her eyes locked on the screen. A progress bar appeared. Encrypting outbound packets. Upload 2%. It's too slow, Lawson said, looking out the reinforced window into the dark valley below. It's a massive file, Chloe shot back. Financial ledgers, drone, telemetry, audio recordings. It's going to take at least 10 minutes. We don't have 10 minutes, Lawson replied, his voice deadly serious. Chloe looked up. Through the window in the distance, she saw it. The faint, rhythmic strobing of aviation lights cutting through the snowfall. It wasn't a commercial plane. It was an MH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, flying nap of the earth completely dark, except for its collision lights. Bradley had sent the cavalry. They tracked the truck, Lawson said, checking his magazines. He had exactly 14 rounds left. Chloe had 10. Hold the door. Chloe ordered, her fingers dancing across the keyboard to optimize the bandwidth. Upload 34%. The helicopter didn't land. It hovered 50 yards away, the downdraft whipping the snow into a blinding cyclone. Ropes dropped from the sides, and 6 heavily armed operators fast-roped to the ground, immediately spreading out into a tactical diamond formation, advancing on the bunker. Titan, Lawson said softly. The Malinois stepped forward, his ears pinned flat, a low, terrifying growl vibrating in his chest. Upload 58%. The first breach attempt came fast. The heavy steel door of the bunker shuddered violently as a breaching charge was slapped against it. Get back, Lawson yelled. Boom! The door blew inward, hanging off its twisted hinges. Smoke filled the corridor. 2 operators rushed the gap. Lawson fired, dropping the first one with a clean shot to the shoulder. The second operator raised his weapon, aiming directly at Lawson, but Titan was faster. The dog launched himself through the smoke, like a missile colliding with the operator, and sending his shots wide into the ceiling. The man and the dog tumbled out onto the snowy landing, locked in a brutal struggle. Titan Lawson screamed, stepping forward to help, but a third operator laid down suppressing fire, forcing Lawson back behind the concrete wall. Upload 82%. "Lawson, I need 3 more minutes," Chloe shouted, drawing her Glock and firing into the smoke to keep the entryway clear. Outside, a sickening yelp cut through the gunfire. Chloe's heart stopped. Lawson's face twisted in pure rage. He abandoned his cover, stepping directly into the fatal funnel of the doorway, and emptied the rest of his magazine. The operator who had struck Titan dropped to the snow motionless. Lawson ran out, grabbing the dog by the harness and dragging him back inside. Titan was limping, blood staining his dark fur near his ribs. But he was alive, his eyes still burning with fight. "I'm out!" Lawson yelled, dropping his empty pistol. Chloe stepped up to the doorway, her Glock raised. She had 5 bullets left. 3 heavily armed men were advancing up the concrete stairs. It was over. They were going to die on this freezing mountain. Upload 99%. "Drop your weapons," a voice boomed from the bottom of the stairs. "Last warning, Cross, give up the drive." Chloe took a deep breath, aligning her sights on the lead man's chest. "Go to hell," she whispered. "Ping," the laptop chimed. Chloe risked a split-second glance backward. The screen glowed a brilliant, vibrant green. Upload complete. Packets delivered. She hadn't just sent it to the government. She had forwarded the raw files to the personal inboxes of every major editor in Washington, D.C., triggering an automated emergency broadcast protocol. At that exact moment, the lead operator's radio crackled to life, the volume so loud Chloe could hear it from the top of the stairs. "Command to Team Alpha. Abort. Abort immediately. We have a massive data hemorrhage. The Pentagon is being raided by the FBI. General Bradley has been detained. I repeat, the target is burned. Stand down." The operator froze. He looked at his radio, then looked up at Chloe, who stood at the top of the stairs, her gun still leveled at his head. Slowly the man lowered his rifle. The other 2 followed suit. They were mercenaries, but they weren't stupid. Their paycheck had just been arrested for treason, and Evelyn Cross was now the most famous whistleblower in American history. Chloe let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 5 years. She lowered her gun, her knees suddenly weak, and slid down the concrete wall. Lawson sat beside her, cradling Titan's head. The dog licked Lawson's chin, then weakly nudged Chloe's knee. The exact same green light sit he had given her in the clinic, acknowledging the mission was over. By the time the sun rose over the snow-capped peaks of Montana, the sky was filled with a different kind of helicopter. Federal agents, military police, and medical evac units swarmed the mountain. General Adrian Bradley was indicted on 42 counts of treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. The entire Shadow Syndicate was ripped out by the roots. As for Captain Evelyn Cross, the military offered her old rank back. They offered her a medal. They offered her a desk in the Pentagon. She declined it all. 3 months later, a rusted 2011 Subaru pulled up to a veterinary clinic in Whitefish, Montana. The snow was finally beginning to melt, revealing the vibrant green grass beneath. Chloe Evans walked through the front doors wearing her familiar blue scrubs. Behind the counter stood David Lawson, organizing files while Titan, fully healed and sporting a bright red bandana, chewed lazily on a tennis ball in the corner. Titan looked up his tail, thumping rhythmically against the floor. Chloe smiled, a real, genuine smile, unburdened by ghosts or secrets. She wasn't Evelyn Cross anymore. She didn't need to be. She was exactly where she belonged. Did this pulse-pounding story of betrayal, survival, and an unbreakable canine bond keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved Titan, the heroic Malinois, and Chloe's incredible fight for justice, hit that like button right now. Share this video with fellow thriller lovers and dog enthusiasts, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible action-packed, true-to-life stories. Drop a comment below. Would you have risked it all to expose the truth?